Douglas MacArthur, one of the most accomplished military leaders in United States history. His level of courage, leadership skills, and sacrifice have been matched by few. Let's find out why. Douglas MacArthur was born January 26, 1880, in Little Rock, Arkansas, to Mary Pinckney Hardy and Arthur MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur's childhood was heavily influenced by his father's career in the Army. Not only was his father an officer in the Army, but also a Medal of Honor recipient. His father won the Medal of Honor in the Civil War during the Battle of Missionary Ridge in Chattanooga, Tennessee, for picking up the colors after the flag bearer was shot and charging up the ridge with his regiment. Growing up, Douglas MacArthur lived at various Army posts across the United States, including Little Rock, Arkansas, Fort Selden, New Mexico, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Washington, D.C., and San Antonio, Texas. Writing about his memories of Fort Selden, Douglas MacArthur said, "My first memory was the sound of bugles. It was here I learned to ride and shoot, even before I could read or write. Indeed, almost before I could walk or talk." These experiences definitely influenced his career later on. After graduating from West Texas Military Academy, which was the equivalent of a high school today, Douglas MacArthur sought an appointment at West Point. His father and grandfather tried to get him a presidential appointment from both Grover Cleveland and William McKinley and failed. It was only after MacArthur took the examination for an appointment that he was able to get in. MacArthur reported to West Point on June 13, 1899. His mother also moved to the suite of a nearby hotel overlooking the school grounds. This is what's known as helicopter parenting. He graduated first in his 93-man class on June 11, 1903. MacArthur started his career off in the Corps of Engineers. His early assignments included the Philippines, Japan, and San Francisco, yet his early career was also unremarkable. It wasn't until May of 1914 that Douglas MacArthur got his first experience in combat. In 1914, the United States occupied Veracruz, Mexico, following the dispute where some American sailors were arrested. While occupying Veracruz, the United States was weighing the option of advancing further into Mexico, but they needed trains for logistical support, and there were no locomotives in Veracruz. MacArthur led a secret midnight mission behind enemy lines to see if he could locate any trains. The group traveled around 40 miles using pump cars and horses to a town called Alvarado to confirm intelligence that there were locomotives there. They were able to verify the locomotives were there, but on their way back they were ambushed. MacArthur shot multiple assailants and was shot at multiple times. Miraculously, the bullets all passed through his clothing without hitting him.
It's a miracle.
MacArthur was recommended for the Medal of Honor, but the recommendation fell through because the mission hadn't been authorized by his commanding general. In 1914, World War I also started, but the United States would not get involved until 1917. When they did get involved, Douglas MacArthur was working in the office of the Secretary of War. He proposed making a division that would use National Guard volunteers from all different states to fight in the war, a division that stretches like a rainbow from one end of America to the other, and thus the Rainbow Division was born. MacArthur was appointed Chief of Staff of the 42nd Rainbow Division. He and the division arrived in France in November of 1917. MacArthur's service record during World War I was highly commendable. Some of the combat he saw consisted of the following: accompanying a French unit on a nighttime raid of a German trench, personally conducting a reconnaissance of German positions by crawling over dangerous terrain, leading the 84th Brigade in the main assault against the Germans at Saint-Mihiel, and leading the 84th Brigade in taking Côte de Châtillon in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. When the order came to take Côte de Châtillon, MacArthur's commander said, "Give me Châtillon, MacArthur, or turn in a list of 5,000 casualties." MacArthur replied, "We'll take it, or my name will head the list." They took the hill, and MacArthur was nominated a second time for the Medal of Honor, but again did not receive it. MacArthur was a true leader who led from the front. His valor also came with more risks. During the war, he was wounded twice, once in action and once after being caught without a mask in a gas attack. Douglas MacArthur's total World War I decorations included 7 Silver Stars, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 1 Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Croix de Guerre, and 2 Wound Chevrons. Back then, they didn't give out Purple Hearts. Instead, they gave out chevrons that you could wear on your sleeve for every time you were wounded. After the war, Douglas MacArthur would need to get chest expansion surgery to fit all his medals. In the decades following World War I, MacArthur rose in both rank and influence. In 1919, at the age of 39, he became the superintendent of West Point. Then, on November 21, 1930, he was sworn in as Chief of Staff of the United States Army. In 1935, the Commonwealth of the Philippines was created as a way to transition the Philippines from a U.S. territory into an autonomous country. President Manuel Quezon requested Douglas MacArthur supervise the creation of a Philippine army. With President Roosevelt's approval, MacArthur accepted the assignment and moved to the Philippines. While serving in the Philippines, MacArthur married Jean Faircloth in 1937 and fathered a son who they named Arthur MacArthur IV. MacArthur retired from the Army in 1937 but stayed in the Philippines as a civilian consultant. In 1941, as world tensions were heating up, President Roosevelt federalized the Philippine Army, recalled MacArthur to active duty, and named him commander of the U.S. Army forces in the Far East. Later that year, on December 8th, the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked, Japan invaded the Philippines. General MacArthur attempted to slow the Japanese advance, but within weeks, American and Filipino forces had been cornered into the Bataan Peninsula. General MacArthur moved his headquarters to an underground tunnel on the island fortress of Corregidor off the coast of Bataan. His troops started calling him Dugout Doug, not only because they perceived him to be hiding in a dugout while they fought, but also because he had been dug out of retirement and was past his prime. Keep in mind, MacArthur was 61 years old at this point. As the situation got worse, President Roosevelt ordered General MacArthur to relocate his headquarters to Australia. On March 12, 1942, he escaped Corregidor on a boat and then flew to Australia. U.S. forces on Bataan surrendered on April 9, 1942. General MacArthur was awarded the Medal of Honor for his efforts in the Philippines, but the whole affair was controversial because he hadn't actually done anything to deserve it. People speculate that this was a PR stunt by George Marshall, meant to appease General MacArthur into not criticizing him or Washington for failing to send reinforcements. Regardless, MacArthur became part of the first father-son duo to receive the award. Upon his arrival in Australia, General MacArthur gave a speech in which he famously promised, "I shall return," referring to the Philippines. This is not footage of the original speech, but here is him giving a later iteration of it in Australia.
I landed on your soil. I said to the people of the Philippines whence I came, I shall return.
General MacArthur implemented a plan to neutralize Japan and take back the Philippines through island hopping, a strategy where the United States and Australian forces would skip over heavily fortified islands in order to seize lightly defended islands that could support the next advance. This strategy was successful, and on October 20th, 1944, U.S. forces landed in the Philippines. General MacArthur personally walked onto the beach as a symbolic gesture that he had fulfilled his promise. Following his triumphant return, General MacArthur was promoted to General of the Army, also known as Five-Star General, the highest rank in the Army. MacArthur continued to command U.S. Army forces in the Pacific until Japan's surrender, which he signed on September 2, 1945. General MacArthur and his staff drafted Japan's new constitution, and in 1949, MacArthur handed over power to the Japanese government. Even after all the action he saw in World War II, General MacArthur's career would continue into the Korean War. On June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and General MacArthur was selected to be the Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Command, which was helping South Korea. By August 1950, UN forces had been pushed back into the Pusan perimeter, a small pocket in the southeast corner of Korea. In a stroke of genius, MacArthur planned an amphibious invasion behind enemy lines at the port of Incheon. Incheon was a risky place to make a landing because of the extreme tide levels. When the tide went out, it left mud flats up to 2 miles long, which would make backup support difficult. This gamble paid off though, and on September 12th, UN forces took Incheon. By October, the North Koreans had been pushed back almost to China. However, on October 19th, the Chinese intervened, and Chinese troops came across the Yalu River to help North Korea. By January of 1951, the Chinese and North Koreans had conquered Seoul again. These setbacks prompted General MacArthur to contemplate using nuclear weapons against the Chinese. In addition to his escalating approach to the war, General MacArthur also had a massive ego and had been insubordinate to President Truman. Not wanting to go down in history as the president who started World War III, President Truman fired General MacArthur. On April 18, 1951, General MacArthur gave a farewell address to Congress. Here's the most famous line from that speech.
That old soldiers never die. They just fade away. And like the old soldier of that ballad, I now close my military career and just fade away.
Douglas MacArthur died on April 5, 1964 of acute kidney and liver failure. Contrary to what he said in his farewell speech, MacArthur may have died, but his influence on our world has not faded away. Thanks for watching.